Hey guys, welcome back to Star Wars Timeline. Today I have a very special guest, Meg. I'm so happy to have you. Please tell everybody what your channel is all about, what you do, and so forth. Introduce yourself, please.
Sure. I'm so glad that I'm able to be on your podcast with you talking about all these topics. I mostly do book reviews. Last year, I reread all the 90s era Star Wars books, which I did it. I'm not sure how. It ended up being 44 books. This year, I'm rereading the New Jedi Order series from 1999 to, I think, 2002, 2003. And I'm also trying to read each phase of the High Republic books as they're released.
Oh, nice. Okay, so I'm not sure if I was aware that you were talking about your High Republic stuff. So you are on current on canon. That's very nice.
Yeah.
I think I stumbled into your YouTube randomly. I'm like, okay, here's another small YouTuber like myself, and wow, she's actually focused on the Legends books, and that really was the point that drew me to your reviews. And you were so detailed and methodical about how you talk about Star Wars, and then Mara Jade, and topic upon topic. I think we started interacting through the messages on YouTube, and here we are.
Yeah.
So my first question to you, if you could please describe your first experience with Star Wars for our audience.
Sure. So my first experience with Star Wars, I was a little bit too young to have seen the original trilogy, but I was the perfect age for when Lucas released the special edition of the original trilogy in theaters in 1997, sort of that test run before episode 1.
Mm-hmm.
I saw it with my dad. I left the theaters and I wanted to know what happened next. Unfortunately, I had older cousins and stuff that I could ask, like, what happens next? And they gave me the Thrawn books, they gave me the Jedi Academy trilogy, and it really went from there. Really enjoyed the prequels. I didn't feel like I connected with them as much as the characters from the original trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I've been trying to stay up to date with Star Wars ever since. There were some times when I was just reading a few books, but especially once Disney bought the franchise and rebooted it, I was like, okay, I got to get back into this. I got to, try to read all the books as they come out again.
Yeah, so you definitely sound like a lifelong fan. And I hear from a lot of fans, actually, that 1997 special editions re-released in theaters were a big starting point for fans because, it is the biggest saga in the cinematic history, but people don't realize in the mid 90s the popularity was waning, and
yeah,
it was the special editions thanks to those that it got reintroduced. And Lucas said, you know what, let me do another trilogy. I always planned for more, and here's the sequels that are going to come out in 1999. Now, did you feel any different watching Star Wars as a girl versus boys?
I'm not sure if I did. I honestly loved all the characters equally for different reasons. Like, I wanted to be Princess Leia. I found years ago stories I had written in which I became like Princess Leia's friend, and we would just go on adventures with Han Solo together. But I also really liked Luke and his Jedi journey, which is a lot more the stereotypical hero's journey.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just loved Lando. There's something very suave about Billy D. Williams' portrayal of Lando. So I don't know, like all of them for different reasons were my favorite.
Yeah.
But definitely reading the books, the characters that I felt closest to were like Mara Jade or Jaina Solo or more characters that I could see myself in, as opposed to I love Luke, but I don't really see myself as a Jedi at all.
Yeah. Totally, yeah. And this is the reason, I was so happy that I finally have my first lady guest and a person who is so well versed in Star Wars. And you hear, and it's a little bit upsetting when you go to like Facebook groups and there's thousands and thousands of fans, and it's so much more male oriented. And I mean the perspective that fans come into it. It's like it's about us. No, it's not. I'm sorry. Like, we all enjoy Star Wars. And I'm glad you're here, and I can't wait to hear more on specific topics. Like we're going to get into Legends and more and so forth. Maybe not within the span of one podcast, but we'll see where it goes. But so you were introduced through the special editions, and who might I ask was your favorite character, and what was it specifically about them that attracted you?
Oh, favorite character. Oh, that's hard. I don't know. I think probably Leia. I love how strong she is. She's like physically the smallest of that group, but she's such a like a firebrand, and she goes through so much and she still stays like true to herself even through all of it. She's also both the most diplomatic one because she was a senator, but I also feel of Leia and Luke, she's perhaps the one that has inherited Anakin's temper more than her brother because, yeah, she is very diplomatic when she wants to be, but she can also rip into people when the need arises.
That's a very interesting connection to the prequels, and it's interesting to observe how they have reshaped and remolded the canonical views on these characters that we know. You know, we had first the trilogy, the originals, and there was no more story to it. Everything else you had to kind of imagine. And then the books slowly started supplementing some material, and now we had the prequels, and it totally kind of like shifts the narratives.
Yeah.
Now, if you'd like, you can mention how old were you, you know, around the times watching the original, your first experience with Star Wars. But my question is, were you specifically looking for or paying attention or noticing that there was a lack of women in Star Wars?
I don't think I noticed it as a child. I think it was like I'm trying to think. I think I was 11 when the special edition trilogy came out. And I think it was more as I started to read the books. And then like at this point, I have seen probably Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi countless times. I had them on VHS tape and I would just watch them over and over again. And it started to, you get the realization. You're like, wait a minute. I mean, we got Leia. And then there's like maybe a few ladies on Hoth. And then Mon Mothma shows up. And then aside from some alien women in Jabba's palace and the cantina, that's really it. And it wasn't until I got older that I started to be like, wait a minute. Like, why is there's like not really any women in this world.
Yeah. And, you know, the reason that I ask you this question is that, you know, I come from a different part of the world and obviously a different culture. I came to the U.S. in 96 when I was 14 years old. I'm from Russia originally. And, you know, Russia being to this day a bit more of a conservative society where the gender roles and, you know, behaviors are certainly different and expectations of women and men are different. But to be honest with you, the reason that I ask is I believe, universally have a common understanding that before children hit puberty, we're androgynous. We want to play with girls. Some girls I hear who are Star Wars fans, they wanted to play around with boy toys in regards to Star Wars, like lightsaber, and they wanted the Vader figure versus Leia's doll, stuff like this. When I was watching it as a kid, I started in '87 where my dad brought these pirated VHS tapes home, dubbed with a single Russian translator, because we didn't have access to Western cinema. It was like so stupid. But when I was seeing it, there was no distinction or differentiation. How many men, how many women? I gravitated towards Luke as much as Leia, as much as Han. They were all heroes in my eyes. I was like, I never questioned for a second as a child, like, oh, can a lady do this? Can she like grab a gun and blast a wall and say, hey, nerf her to jump here? I'm going to provide the exit. As a kid, you just absorb it. And I think our opinions and our views change the older we grow. We start bringing the mature context, the extrapolate things from real life into it. And, it changes in many ways. So what I want to do next, Meg, is introduce kind of like the first central theme, the large topic of discussion. And if you permit, I'll start first and, we'll take it from there. Obviously, the Joseph Campbell and hero's journey motifs and mythological motifs and story threads in Star Wars. What are your favorite female roles in general in fiction? And by that, I mean, I'm sorry. And by that, I mean the function that females perform in those stories.
Yeah. Thinking back to some of my favorite like childhood books and books that I grew up reading, I always loved Robin McKinley is an author that she had these two sort of related books, The Hero and the Crown. And then the other one is, oh, the blue sword is the first one, but the hero in the crown is the one that I always remember. And the hero in the crown is about a princess who becomes a dragon slayer. So I always sort of love that push and pull between someone's role, like what they're born to do and what they want to do. And I just found that really interesting. You know, someone who's a princess but wants to slay dragons, or someone that's a peasant but wants to become a diplomat, like that. I guess that nurture versus nature
Yeah, I think
argument.
you and I both agree. Like, you know, when you delve into mythology and fantasy literature in general, it's a very common motif where a female disguised as male who wants to go to war and you know, alter everybody's perception of her, or subvert expectations, say, no, I can't do this. It's a quite a popular motif, I think, since the Middle Ages and earlier. But I want to now to go deeper a little bit and talk about the classical myth. The female creative force, the mother figure, versus the male destructive force, the jealous father. And as an example, I would like to use, of course, the Greek mythology and the story of creation and Kronos and Rhea, the children of Titans and the progenitors of all the Greek gods, where we see the roles of Gaia and Uranus, where Gaia is the nurturing and protective mother. And have you seen any of it in Star Wars, in the films or outside the films? The female hero as a nurturing mother.
Well, I mean, obviously there is, not that we see much of it, but the whole idea of Padme being introduced, that we know, even though we haven't gotten to the part that Padme is going to be the mother of Luke and Leia. In Return of the Jedi, Leia seemed to have some memories of her mother. All of the prequels sort of messed with that a little. Yeah. And so I think some of those, maybe not viewpoint characters, major characters, but some of those background figures. So, you know, Luke and Leia's mother, the Queen of Alderaan, who, although we don't get to see it, have like served that nurturing role to raise up Aunt Beru too. I can't even forget about Aunt Beru, that you have Uncle Owen, who's, you know, not rough on Luke, but yeah, he's very much rules. And Aunt Beru is the nurturing one who's like, it's okay, Luke, and for the little we see of them.
Yeah. And then there's, you know, another story from Egyptian mythos of the, you know, Osiris and his sister Isis, who he marries, you know, again, that duality of nature, the twins who are united into one creative force versus his evil brother Set. And within that story, the female's role is the restorer of life, the bringer of light. And have we seen that in Star Wars?
Bringer of light. Well, I think in a way, Luke being able to confront Vader in Return of the Jedi, I'm not sure that would have happened, at least the way it played out, without the revelation that Leia is his sister. And that, so I don't think he's consciously thinking of it, if I fail, she's there to step in. But I think she's very much there to, like, the idea of her to stop him when he's going too far, and to be able to, you know, say, nope.
Yeah. She has the potential to clearly, when, you know, when Yoda says, no, there is another hope, there is a great potential within Leia to be that bringer of life and to explore those mythological motifs further. Because, you know, one of my favorite scenes in Star Wars in general is before Luke parts to confront Vader, they have this very theatrically staged scene. And even the style of performance that Mark Hamill delivers is very theatrical, very pronounced, where he explains to Leia, look, you have this power too, and in time you will learn to master it. And maybe we haven't seen it on screen. It's the story that each one of us as children try to imagine and complete outside of the boundaries of the screen. But I felt there was that potential. And also, I just had recently a very kind of like confrontational discussion on my Facebook group. It's called Overpowered. And I brought as an example Rey versus Palpatine, saying that a lot of criticism towards Rey is unjust and unfounded, and while at the same time stating that she's not a perfectly written character. There's clear flaws with her. There are clear flaws with prequels or sequels in general. But I think it's important to recognize that she also represents that creative force. She's also corresponds with that classical mythological motif, especially when she tries to heal and does so with Kylo Ren. I felt sequels, in my personal opinion, have returned home with these motifs much more than the prequels done. Prequels were touching more with Christian ideas of the chosen one and the Christian, the patriarchal society of male-dominated society, where there will be a chosen male, who will set things right. With her, it's back to that idea where Kylo Ren represents the male destructive force, and that's why I talked about, Rhea and Uranus, and she represents the creative one. Moving along, now let's take a look at the modern perspective. I do apologize about the sirens. It's a New York thing. What are your personal thoughts on the emphasis of the female representation in modern Star Wars?
I know it's like very contentious. Like some people are definitely on one side and some people are on other. To me, I feel like I really appreciate getting to see more female characters and getting to see them in perhaps bigger roles than we would have seen them in some of the other movies. And I don't feel like they feel forced. Like they feel like a natural part of the story and like a natural progression. Mm-hmm. Just that, there's more of them, and that's something that as an adult I noticed, and as a child I maybe didn't.
Would you say, and there are a lot of fans that I talk to, guy fans, males, they say that it's not they don't take issue with characters like Rose and and Rey and so forth, but how they're executed, and they're basically saying that things are being forced and rushed. And because the sequel trilogy did not have the benefit of a structured and well thought out plot, the female characters suffer because of that. Now, I want to ask you, did you feel that now rereading a lot of these Legends books, and by the way, you're going to be refreshing my memory like crazy, because I was reading these books when they were coming out in the early 2000s, and I also plan to go back and reread them, because a lot of it is just impressions that you remember and not the plot.
Yeah.
But do you feel that Legends females were handled better narratively than the canon females?
Well, it's interesting because the farther along I'm getting in, I guess, the chronological release of the books, the more I notice like female characters taking prominence. When I was reading the Thrawn trilogy, I love Mara Jade. She's one of my favorite characters, mainly because I feel like Timothy Zahn wasn't afraid to make her like mean. Like she's not necessary. Well, she's definitely not a good guy when she starts, and
absolutely.
through her interactions with Luke, she grows and improves. But when you first meet her, like she is the opposite of diplomatic. She just says what she wants, and it's not nice sometimes. Yeah. But I found reading them that sometimes we would have Leia, or we'd have Mar, we'd have Winter, but then there weren't like a lot of other women. But like now, as I'm getting further into the series and getting into the new Jedi Order, especially with the new generation of Jedi that they wrote about, there's a lot more of them. So it's interesting. It's almost like I don't know if people were writing that to them or if people even noticed, but it's like the authors at the time were sort of like, oh, maybe there's something we could do a little better here.
Yeah. It's fun that you bring them, RJ. I think she is universally loved by men, women, all across the board, because she's just an excellent, excellent character. And we see a progression with her. She's not that. While I personally enjoy traditional stories where, a princess in distress needs her male saver, I don't find anything wrong with those stories. But to counterbalance that, you also have females who don't swoon into their hero's arms just because she doesn't get involved emotionally with Luke only much later, even though they go through that very stressful situation in the beginning on in the jungles of the planet that they land. I keep forgetting the name of the planet, but
Wayland. Well, they're in Merkur, first book.
Thank you.
He really Zahn really likes to write them hiking through jungles.
Yeah, I love that part. It's because it left such a huge visual imprint on me.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that even though they go through this bonding experience together, they change each other's points of views and so forth. And she still is not willing to, like, oh my God, my savior. No, she's very self-asserted. She's very strong from within. It's not the fact for me that she repeats all the physical feats that other males can do in the light sword and swashbuckling. That's all fine and good. But she has that strong central female core. She knows who she is. And later on in the books, when you get into the New Jedi Order and the legacy of the Force, the whole thing with the Jason, how she tries to approach her nephew in that regard, and her son Ben, I loved and appreciated that she has that female core, the motherly core, the gentle core. And I think it's very, very important to maintain in modern Star Wars as well. Moving on. I sent you a picture through email. Let's talk just a tiny bit about Kathleen Kennedy and her wearing the shirt saying, "The Force is female." What does that personally mean to you, and why do you think there's such a huge, diplomatically spoken reaction by fans?
Yeah, I guess I can see for fans, especially, maybe fans that aren't like me, that assigning, the way that looked, assigning a gender to the Force is off-putting, and it makes it feel like they're not wanted in Star Wars. There's also a part of me that grew up with the Spice Girls, who always see things like that as like, oh, look, it's girl power. But I know other people don't approach it the same way. I think for some people, I think it's like what you said with the sequel trilogy, where there's like, some people take issue with the character itself, and some people take issue with the way the character's used. And so sometimes stuff like that, which probably was meant completely innocuously, because I think those pictures, it was like a film festival at an old girls' college or something like that. So the setting makes it make a lot of sense why they'd all be wearing shirts that said the Force is female, but the way it's presented to like the general fandom, like, doesn't come off the same way.
Yeah. On my end, there's two things I'd like to call out. First of all is, for me, there's nothing wrong with the phrase, the Force is female, because, again, I brought it as an example in the beginning, the myth of creation.
Yeah.
The creative force is always female, and that's what the Force is, unless a Jedi or a Sith tries to use it in their selfish or selfless manner. It doesn't have any other function than to create. And as we know in nature, in biology, it's the female sex that creates. And I think some of the criticism is perhaps justified, and some of it is entirely not. Now, first, I would like to touch where it is. I think some of the fans are frustrated where they're not being toxic, and they see clear issues with sequels. And when somebody like Rian Johnson, who I personally respect as a filmmaker, who goes in and he has to respond to some criticism on Twitter, and they get involved in these Twitter wars. Like Justinia Ireland, African-American writer, who has a children's book, and people kept pestering her on Twitter to such a degree. He said, look, I don't need white men to tell me how to write my books. If you find this is not for you, this is not good for you, don't pick up my books, don't buy them. And of course, people put it, completely spin it around and use it on their own hatred and say, well, you see what she's saying? Now Disney is telling us not to buy Star Wars. But, oh my God, how could this? They take it for a spin. But the point is that in that context, when Kathleen Kennedy says, look, the Force is female too, I applaud it, I welcome it. I understand some of the criticism. I don't other criticism. For example, there's unfortunately a very negative aspect to our fan base, and that has to deal with Ahsoka. When she was first introduced, it's a children's show, which is supposed to be all-inclusive. It's supposed to be boys and girls are androgynous. They all observe these stories together. And it doesn't matter to a young boy whether Ahsoka is a female or a male. Whether it's a good character or not, that's what matters to them. And I couldn't believe how, in the manner that adult men were talking about Ahsoka. Oh, she's garbage, she's boring. Just because she's female, she's put in the front of the show. Oh my! And then the same people, by that season 7, say, oh my God, all the progression. Oh Jesus, this is fun. So there definitely exists this very polarizing aspect of Star Wars, and while some fans have legitimate criticism, others are completely unfounded.
I was just going to say, with Ahsoka, I felt the same way as you, that there were people complaining about just her existence.
Yeah.
And the same people that by the time the final season comes out, they're like, wow, what an amazing character. And I'm like, that's character development. She starts out as this little teenage girl, but she grows and develops. And you could probably say, I'm sure that people could take issue with the fact that maybe Ahsoka being Anakin's Padawan takes focus away from Anakin and Obi-Wan's relationship, but that's completely different than just complaining about her very existence.
Yeah, as not a huge prequels fan, I also found some issues with her. I was like, hold on a second, in what time period would we have Ahsoka, and for her not to be represented to any degree on screen? That doesn't make sense. But you know how I was able to embrace the Clone Wars show, which to me, the Clone Wars show, the Rebels show, and the Bad Batch represents the very best of Star Wars since Episode 6. Nothing else can touch that.
Yeah.
Based on the power and the strength of those stories and characters. But with Ahsoka, I said, hold on a second. Let me stop being jaded. Okay, I wasn't the biggest fans of prequels. Let's see what this show has to offer. And believe it or not, in my opinion, once again, you may disagree, I think George Lucas has demonstrated his absolute genius of storytelling in that show. Thanks to Dave Filoni, who was able to bring that vision to life. And we're going to later talk about Omega. If Dave Filoni's name is in the credits, I'm like, okay, just give me. I don't care what it's, just give me. Because I trust his sensibilities. I trust his judgment where he knows the core material, but he takes it into very unexpected territory. And Meg, now if we could get into a very specific topic, and of course the biggest woman in Star Wars, and always will be. Leia as the first woman in Star Wars. What is Leia's role in the original trilogy, and what is its impact on those films?
Well, she's definitely the impetus behind everything that happens. Luke never would have left Tatooine, never would have started his Jedi journey if it wasn't for Leia. So she is at least at that point, the quintessential damsel in distress. They need to rescue her. But as soon as they get on the Death Star and get her out of her cell, she's completely not what they expected. She, talking back, taking over the rescue, redirecting things. So, yeah, I find it very interesting how Lucas takes this archetype and then twists it. And makes it, she's such a dynamic character as a result.
And, just a bit of your thoughts, if you could, continue with that, in the episode 5 and 6, how he changes, how her dynamics when Han Solo change.
Yeah.
What is that about?
I think it's interesting to me, as a person that loves costumes, how Leia's costumes change, because obviously in A New Hope, she's always wearing white, just the white. She's wearing white at the awards ceremony. It definitely sets her apart as she's the princess. And she starts out wearing white in the Hoth scenes, but when they go to Cloud City, obviously she gets that other outfit, the sort of tunic and pants and the beautiful overdress, and that's in colors. So I think Empire Strikes Back really shows how she's growing and how her relationship with Han Solo changes her, deepens her to the point that her costumes start to change as well. Yeah. I think that the Leia of A New Hope never would have rescued Han from Jabba's palace in the same way that later Leia does. Yeah,
she clearly turns the expectations on its head. She's self-assertive, she's strong, and it's not about her. Once again, I want to reiterate this point. It's not about her picking up a gun and doing the male shtick. She comes with this torrent, this living force, this energy that only a woman can have. Yeah. Every child, every boy knows that when he is under protection of his mother. When you're in the safari and the female lioness is protecting her child, the male is standing off to the side. He's afraid of her because that's the kind of energy and strength that she portrays, that I will do anything for my cub.
I think Return of the Jedi, the only reason that they end up allying with the Ewoks is because of Leia. Luke and Han and the rest of them all get stuck in a trap, but she meets an Ewok. She's kind to an Ewok. She gives him food. And as a result, that's the reason they end up winning.
That's a great point, actually. It's a very, very cool point. What defines a strong woman and what makes Leia strong?
Yeah, so for a strong woman, I mean, like you said, it's not just her ability to pick up a blaster and shoot. I think it's her, like, her force of will and also her commitment to things. She is so committed to the rebel cause. And even the death of her family and the death of her entire planet is not enough to turn her away from that. So I think like strength of will and strength of just like that internal strength, even more so than physical strength.
And I think why the original trilogy stands the test of time is that all of its characters are flawed. They're not perfect. You have a strong female surrounded by three male characters. You know, Lando Calrissian always to me has been the biggest part of Star Wars. There is no big three. There's big four. And what's interesting about them, you know, there's just like the first and second Wonder Woman films, which I adore. I love them, which I feel strike that conversation in a very balanced manner. Obviously, first film being a better one in general. I think it was a finer crafted movie. But in the original trilogy, Leia is the one who gives advice, who demonstrates power, and who solves problems, but at the same time, not without the help of her friends. The fact that they're men or not men has no meaning there. It's inconsequential. What matters is that she's not perfect. We all going through life depend on friendship, on understanding, on conversation, on reaching out to people. And this is where Leia and Luke become the everlasting symbol of humanity, of our nature, is those twin sons of Tatooine, which we see in a tremendously beautiful scene when Luke passes away in the Last Jedi, where we see him meditating, and those two sons come about once again, the rising and the falling, the duality of things. I felt that Leia was a huge part of that, being the bringer of light.
Yeah.
Now, let me just gather my thoughts here. Oh, yes, here we are. Let's talk about a little move away from the films that talk about the Legends novels. Specifically, I want to ask you, how did you feel about Leia's evolution in Legends novels, being the Jedi Master that she eventually becomes, but also a mother of twins and eventually 3 children, versus her role in the canon movies and becoming part of the Resistance and being a Rey's mentor?
Yeah, so in the Legends books, the Bantam era features Leia sort of putting that Jedi side of her like off to the side. She's completely focused on politics, to the extent that she maybe can't spend as much time with her children as she would have liked, because she's the chief of state. She's like the big wig in the New Republic. But the New Jedi Order starts to show her reevaluating that, mainly because she's coming into conflict with her, now almost adult children, reevaluating that. And then the books going forward is her training as a Jedi and taking on that role, which I think it's a very interesting progression. That at first she's solely focused on the diplomatic side, which is her upbringing, what her adoptive parents taught her, and it's only as things progress that she is able to accept more of her biological father and the skills she's inherited, and move forward with that. It's like a really interesting arc. It is a bit opposite from what we got in the sequel trilogy, where, we have Leia after Endor training with Luke, wanting to learn more about her heritage, but then putting that aside and just going the diplomatic route until she finds that isn't feasible anymore. And then, General Leia going forwards and sort of being the mentor to the new generation of heroes.
Meg, if I can use your assist here while I'm going to talk my point, if you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was Tatooine Ghost, specifically that book, where Leia finally comes to terms who her father was. And I think, whether deliberately or not, but the Bantam era books focused on a very important theme of Leia not identifying with her Skywalker legacy and calling
Yeah.
herself Leia Organa because of the fear on both Luke's side and her side of not repeating the same mistakes of giving birth to the next Vader.
Yeah.
And I believe, please correct me if I'm wrong. Once again, I believe there is a scene where either Vader's ghost or he comes to her in a dream and he kind of like makes her pour out and bring all those feelings and emotions in the open and say like, look, no, you're not me. And you and Luke saw the good in me and you were able to bring me back to the good side. You must continue the line of the Skywalkers.
Yeah, I think it's Tatooine Ghost where it's not long after Han and Leia's marriage, and Han's fine. Leia's feeling very reticent about the idea of having children because the idea of what if my child becomes the next Darth Vader, and learning to accept like, don't worry about that. Teach them the best you could, and that's all you can do.
Yeah, and unfortunately, at least at this point, the canon expanded universe is only 6 years old versus 40-year rich history that we have with Legends. And obviously, Leia had the benefit of Legends to extend and explore that character in various ways, where with sequel movies specifically, we already have a couple of novels on Leia. I felt that Leia book was absolutely adorable. I loved reading it. I loved her growing up. I loved her interaction with Haldo, who is a much more appealing character to me than she was in the films. But as far as the sequels are concerned, I felt a little bit underwhelmed with Leia's portrayal because there's just not enough of her serving as the important figure in that trilogy for obvious reasons. Unfortunately, when Carrie Fisher passed away, I don't respond or react to celebrity deaths in general because they're human beings like us, and how many people died. But when she passed away, I don't know, part of my childhood was gone with me. I never expected I would respond in such a way because in Russia, when we watch cinema, it's art first and business second, and there was never, at least when I was growing up there was never celebrity worship. You're an actor. Mm-hmm. You're there to perform a task of portraying a classical whatever character. That's the end of it. But here, it was very hard for me to understand the Western culture's insistence on like putting actors on the problem. Something about her, her life journey, the hardships with drugs and bipolar, disorder that she had. I don't know. I just felt it a lot. I don't know if you want to say something on it as well.
No, Carrie Fisher's death. I was home visiting my parents and my dad was just reading news off his iPad and he just goes, "Oh, Carrie Fisher died." And I was like, "No."
Yeah.
And he was like, no, she did. And yeah, her life story is like so moving. And she was such an intelligent woman. I have several of the books she's written. She just had such a way with words that I don't usually feel anything about celebrities because, they're actors, they're doing their job. But I did really feel something when Carrie died. And I wish I could have seen what role they would have had her play in the last of the sequel movies because I mean, I just
no. It's and it's good. I think it's good to talk about it as fans. It's good to remember. And so long that the name of Carrie Fisher, the name of Leia is there. She's alive. She's there with us spiritually.
Yeah.
Now let's talk a little bit about Star Wars and its women in television shows. The first topic I want to touch about, we have Clone Wars series, which started in 2008. We had Rebels show, and now we have Disney Plus as a streaming service, which is the home for Star Wars. And I believe television, and because of its nature, has transformed the landscape of storytelling as far as Star Wars is concerned. We have female in feature films like Korra from Akira from Solo. We have Jyn Erso from Rogue One. How do you see the effectiveness of those film female characters versus somebody like Ahsoka from the Clone Wars, Hera Syndulla from the Rebels show, and now we have Omega from the Bad Batch?
I think it's a difference between the types of media that obviously with a movie, you're limited to 2 hours. You got 2 hours to get to know someone. And in the case of Jyn, you meet her and then she dies like everyone else on the Rogue One mission. But what I love about the Star Wars TV shows is they get more time to spend with them. And, you know, it's not like, oh, we're building towards this point. Obviously, there's arcs for the seasons, but like the most recent episode of the Bad Batch, where they can just take an episode that, you know, maybe has 5 minutes of the Bad Batch, but the rest is give us this really great look at Hera and how she was as a child, and how, you know, those events that happened to her obviously influenced the woman that she became.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, I feel that the television format and serialized format, especially, which the Bad Batch, I think, adheres to the most. You know, Clone Wars jumped around episodes and stories, and Rebels was serialized, and I believe the Bad Batch is even more so. It's going to benefit both male and female characters. And if there was prior negligence of characters like Cray saying, oh, you know, things happen too quick for her. She's a Mary Sue. You know, she accomplishes too quickly. Well, now we have the tools through the television to really delve into the issues of LGBTQ representation, women, what does it mean to be a female fan in the Star Wars. Now the topic is open, and there is no excuse. Like, if you mess up once and you, like, for example, I even forget the name of this character in the Solo, the love interest of the bounty hunter or the scoundrel, and then she dies in the first mission.
Val,
exactly.
Yeah, Val,
right? They hire such a tremendously powerful actress, and she's so quickly discarded, and you don't even like remember her name. I'm like, come on, man. I wish more was there, because the film clearly set something up, and especially at the end, the pirate girl, what's her name? The young pirate at the end when she unmasks her.
Enfys Nest.
Enfys Nest. Thank you so much. Enfys Nest. Right? It's like it throws all these cool characters to you. I'm like, dude, I want more. And now we have shows to provide for that.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think that's the thing with movies. Like, they could throw these characters out, they're in for 5 minutes, and you're like, give me more. Like, I need more. And fortunately, I think the TV shows can provide that and fill in the gap there.
Mm-hmm. And here I want to return back to a little bit to comparisons that we're making with sequels. And, you know, what is the fan reaction to Rey versus fan reaction to Ahsoka? And which personally do you think is a better role model?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because obviously there's a lot to like about Rey, but it does because you're only really going off of 6 hours worth of content that she moves very quickly. I mean, in the same way, Luke in the original trilogy, he does sort of level up pretty fast because, you know, it's not quite, how long is he on Dagobah? He goes from, you know, A New Hope, and he's not very good with a lightsaber, to he's pretty good. But I could see how not being able to see so much of their development can make it harder to accept, like, the great feats that they accomplish. But with Ahsoka, yeah, we've seen her through 7 seasons of the TV show. We've seen her since she was that little tiny girl, comparatively. And now to the point, and then watching and then watching her, especially all the way through Rebels, and now even into The Mandalorian, that just, since we've spent so much more time with her, we just get a better sense of her character and a better sense of, like, how she's grown and why she's grown, that it's like easier to accept what she does. You know,
I would argue that even without her presence in The Mandalorian show, which I felt was the most meaningful of all episodes in the Mando show, I would argue that she is the greatest female character in Star Wars in general. And I've been reading Legends for 20 plus years. There's a lot of females that I love. I love Tenel Ka. I love Mara Jade. I love Tahiri Vela. I love so many different characters. But there's something to be said about seeing a character on screen and living with them and hearing the voice actress's voice portraying her. And when we see her first, this brash and headstrong female, a teenager in her prime, you know, and dealing with all of these teenage issues, and not just with the mythological fantasy stuff or Star Wars. She's dealing with very real things that we all can relate to. What does it mean to trust your master? What does it mean to listen to advice or obey, you know, orders? And for me, she was relevant and meaningful from day one. And I could understand the criticism. I'm like, powerful characters are not meant to be likable or enjoyable right off the bat. You're supposed to see a progression there and say like, oh, this is where she starts and this is where she ends. And just like we are human beings, look, it's our first conversation, which I'm having tons of fun. You're a very, lovely woman, and you know your stuff, what you're talking about. But I'm pretty sure if we were to get to know each other better, there would be aspects of things like, I don't like how that person thinks here or there. We're not meant to be perfect human beings, and neither is Ahsoka. And that is exactly, in my eyes, what makes her absolutely beautiful role model.
Yeah, I think what I find so interesting about Ahsoka is like so many of her attributes you would have never known if you just gave up at the beginning. If you keep watching, she left the Jedi Order. She didn't, so she has this very, by the end, conflicted idea of like, what the Jedi Orders come to represent and what it means to her. And you would never get that if you just watch the first episode that she was in, or I guess technically the movie, which is like 4 episodes.
It's the perseverance and patience from our fandom. I think it's crucial. And again, great point. Next question I has is, let's talk about the Bad Batch and Omega. I know that fans had certain expectations from the Bad Batch show because we see them at the end of the Clone Wars, and Dave Filoni stresses that the Bad Batch are George Lucas's creation. They're based on the episodes that were written while George Lucas was still, chief, storyteller. How do you feel about a female child at the heart, as the heart and soul of a new Star Wars show?
I actually really like it. Watching the final season of Clone Wars, I was not sure if I was going to like the spinoff of the Bad Batch because the guys, I obviously got a sense of like, Wrecker's the strong one and Hunter's the leader. And I didn't like, what's his name? Crosshair. And Tech is the techie one. But I find that by adding Omega to the show, adding this, preteen girl, it gives them like someone to teach and someone to take care of, and it in turn makes the guys more interesting to me than they initially were. And I think it also helps that Omega, sometimes children's characters, like they're either just there for plot reasons or they end up feeling like not like a child, like they're really precocious or something. But Omega feels like a child to me, and she feels like a child who has lived a very sheltered life, and like this is her first time being out in the real world. So I really appreciate that aspect of her character too, not just what she brings to the group, but like how she's herself is portrayed.
It's once again, I don't understand the criticism of saying like, oh, if it's Omega, she's a child, she's annoying, I don't want to see it. I find it, forgive me for being blunt, a very narrow-minded perspective. By the time that the Clone Wars concluded, we had it for 7 seasons. Over 10-year show. How much more story were fans expecting to extract from it? It's over. It's done. And when a new show is there and it opens up with the fanfare of the Clone Wars to kind of like say goodbye to that show, and we see Wolf Yularen's voice introduce the episode, and that's where it ends. I felt it was such a huge signal by Dave Filoni saying, look, I'm not going to cater to fans. George Lucas never has. Rian Johnson has never done that, and I'm not going to do it the same. I'm going to take the formula. I think I understand what I'm doing, but I'm going to turn it all around. And now, if the clones were the heroes of the Clone Wars show, and honestly, it took me a while to understand that. And I think it was very deliberate because you see Anakin here, Ahsoka there, and then Obi-Wan Kenobi, Mace Windu. And I'm like, hold on a second. These are the guys who are the mega stars. But then you see that clones are the ones who lift this war on their shoulders, and Rex and Fives and Echo and all these dudes. I'm like, oh my God. By season 3, I'm like, they're the heroes. It's the story about them. And come enter, Bad Batch. And I agree with you. We see very distinct personalities, exceptionally well portrayed characters who are so identified well. But I'm asking myself a question. Well, hold on a second. If it's going to be just like Clone Wars, but the only difference is that they're on their own now because the Empire, what's different? What's changed?
Yeah.
And then they like flip and like here is this girl who, in my eyes, is becoming Luke Skywalker's journey realized in the female perspective. She's self-reliant, but she's a child.
Yeah.
She's capable, but she needs the duality of her character and what she represents, I believe, is magnificent. And the voice actress who portrays her, and I mean it to say it in the most innocent and sincerest way, I'm in love with this character. I'm in love what she represents for that innocence being disrupted and violated by this horrible, horrible war. And now she has to adapt. And she has all these father figures from, I thought from the trailer that Hunter would be the coolest character and I'll fall for him. The bandana, the, John Rambo looking and Sylvester Stallone character. And then suddenly it's Wrecker, this dull brute who is like there. He's like, ha, ha, ha. And he wants to be a father for her,
Yeah. The moment when he was like, hey, we made the gunnery turret your bedroom, I was like, oh my gosh.
Right? That was awesome. So before going into the show, we saw that awesome trailer, which I thought was like one of the best trailers for Star Wars. Did you have certain expectations or anticipation where the show would go?
I guess I didn't. I knew it was going to be set after the Clone Wars, so I figured it was going to be dealing with, the beginnings of the Empire and things like that. But I didn't really have a lot of expectations, which I found that sometimes if I hype myself up too much, then it's always better in my head than it ends up being. So yeah, I'm really pleased by what we've gotten so far. I think particularly because I was just like, I'm just going to wait and see. And then it was a lot of fun.
You're mirroring the words of Dante at Geekery with Dante, as comic book YouTuber, who I also invite to my podcast and we talk. He's exactly like, he's like, I learned a long time ago not to like expect things because you might come away, with a disappointment. Does Omega's gender matter in this show?
I don't think it does. I think what matters more is, her background, the fact that she's the last remaining pure clone of Jango Fett. But I do think that like having her be, female instead of being a boy does do an interesting twist on things. Because like you're not expecting her, I think, to join them in the way that she does.
Yeah. I think to me it's not yet crucial, but I think later on it could be exploited in a very, very meaningful way that she is a woman. An example I want to bring to you is have you read the Legacy of the Force series?
I read up to Sacrifice, and then as a Mara Jade fan, I did not read the rest.
Okay.
But I did read the first 5.
Moving on to this thought that I had, I think it's not quite important, but it could be a pivotal moment where Omega's gender is important and what she accomplishes. I think it's all in the hands of the storytellers. And the reason that I asked you if you read Legends, at one point, Boba Fett's granddaughter shows up.
Mitra,
right? And I could not believe how much I fell for a character. Like, oh man, here comes this total badass Mandalorian girl who is like, she has a tan skin, short hair, and she will whoop your ass, man. But it's like when they go back and they discuss the Mandalorian culture back on their home planet, Mandalore, which for me personally works a lot better than the way it's portrayed in the Clone Wars show or the current canon. And that very interesting interaction between males and the females and their gender roles in that society. How men and why Boba Fett became the strangler in their Legends universe, because he didn't stand up to his society's expectation of being the provider and a good husband to a woman. And it was very interesting to see Mitra Gev being this female Mandalorian who's just as bad as any of them. Like I said, she will whoop your ass, man. But when it's time to be part of her culture and fulfill that female function, she will do that because that's who they are. And it's not because that role is forced upon Mandalorian women. It's because they find their rightful place there by their man's side. Let me see what else we have here. If you want to add something in the meantime, please, or ask me a question, that'll be wonderful.
Ah,
Okay, this is what I had also.
okay.
Is Dave Filoni catering to female representation movement or fulfilling any Disney Plus agendas?
I don't know. I feel like all pretty much all the female characters he introduced feel like a natural progression of the plot, and some of them I don't like, or I'm thinking of like the Martez sisters who I just found sort of annoying, but they served their purpose. They were there for a reason. So I would say more yes if I felt like these characters were being shoehorned in at the plot's expense, but like I don't feel that to be the case in any of his shows. They always feel like an integral part of the story, and like, they're there for a reason.
I think I would side with you completely. There's not much else I could add. Is Dave Filoni is our guy. He is the person that will never sacrifice injecting stuff or ideas in there without necessity. I feel anything that's extra fat and it doesn't contribute to the story or characters should be eliminated. You should never use important cultural movements, because a show or a movie cannot remain tone deaf. We have the very, very tumultuous last year, and even this year we had the BLM, we have the LGBTQ question in front of us. And as a society, to move forward, we need to address these issues, we need to talk about them, and we should become embracing of people who are not like us.
Yeah.
I don't, just on grounds of being Star Wars fans, let's say you are a prequels lover, I don't love them. If there is a point at which we start bickering over our interest in fictional universe, over treating each other like civil, human beings, it's wasteful of everybody's time, and it's not the way to move forward. So I don't think Dave Filoni is doing that. And how are we doing on time? Are you willing to stay for another 5-10 minutes? I have more questions for you.
Yeah, I can.
All right, cool. So now we talked about the Dave Filoni and that streaming service Disney Plus. Now let's talk about the High Republic. I had a whole podcast with with Dante. We talked about the whole initiative of the High Republic. They have comic books, they have novels. Which ones have you read? Have you read only adult novels, or how far are you in?
So for phase 1, I read Light of the Jedi. I read Ireland's kids book.
Test of Courage?
Yes, I read Test of Courage, and then I read Into the Dark by Claudia Gray. I didn't read any of the comics just because there's not a comic book store by me, and I'm sort of waiting for them to come out, in a trade paperback.
Yeah.
And then with phase 2, I'm currently at a crossroads.
Okay.
My phase 1, I requested from my library, and they got from me very promptly. Phase 2, I'm not sure, because I requested that they purchase the second Thrawn prequel, Greater Good, in March. And it's now July, and they still haven't gotten it. So I might have to actually spend my own hard-earned money and buy phase 2 so I can continue to go forward.
Is the High Republic a sham and a tool for political points, and is it woke garbage?
I haven't felt that way at all. I think I feel the same way as you, especially with Justina Ireland's book, Test of Courage.
Yeah.
I think that was actually my favorite of the phase 1 books that I read so far, just because it was so tightly constructed. Yeah. We had 2 Jedi and 2 non-Jedi. We had 2 girls and 2 boys. And I just really enjoyed it. I feel like and I'm interested to see if I feel the same way about the Rising Storm, but with the Light of the Jedi, I felt like there were too many characters introduced into too short a time span. So I think my biggest problem with the High Republic is just that I find there's too many characters for me to keep track of, and I almost need to make a list of everyone and what their role is and who their master is and who their Padawan is. But I don't feel like it's, serving any kind of agenda. It feels like, a genuine look at the high point of the
Yeah,
high
yeah.
point of the Old Republic and the Jedi Order,
Mhm.
and I guess the beginning of their downfall, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Once again, there I agree with you. It's interesting that you find Test of Courage your favorite book, and I know exactly when you're talking about when you say that it's very tightly woven. Because
Mhm.
on my channel, I also talk about the young Jedi Knights. I recently did the artist highlight of David Dorman, who illustrates the
Oh yeah.
wonderful, wonderful covers for those books. And they're such a joy to read. I also recommend them in my recommendation videos because even though they're intended for younger readers, as an adult, when you read through all the books and put them all, pile them together as chapters of one grand book, they're
Mhm.
so tightly woven. And because it's a children's approach to the children's storytelling and the prose is simpler, it crystallizes all those central important themes very, very vividly.
Yeah.
Here's a good guy. He's a bad guy.
Yeah.
Tenel Ka, remember her episode with the arm that
Yeah.
happens, right? Very crystallized. It's almost like, in a way, I don't know if you remember yourself very well when you were like a younger teen. I do. But it's like you experience the world like on the edge of a knife. Everything is
Yes.
like extra. Everything. Like, oh my God, it's not the same birthday cake. You know what I mean? It's like, oh my God, it's not the same, uniform that I had to wear in school because it's Russia. Boys had to wear a uniform. And that's what the books do to you. And the Test of Courage felt like, at times, very dark. Remember, because
Yeah.
that first disaster that happens at Test of Courage, and the entire ship of adults is gone
Yeah.
forever. I'm like,
They're
oh my
all
God.
gone. Like
Right?
the one boy loses his family. Like
Yeah.
it was really, really dark. But I felt like,
Yeah.
yeah, the emotions they felt and like the progress they went through, like I really resonated with me. And I am not a child.
Yeah, right. And then we have something like men saying, well, anytime you go to the Disney Books Facebook post, it's dominated by these trolls who are like downvote with their likes and trolling pages. Oh, it's woke garbage, this and that. And a lot of it stems from seeing a female character on the cover of the book, Light of the Jedi. You see Ava
Mm.
Chris leading the charge. She obviously is an illustrious figure in that story. She's the
Yeah.
marshal of the Jedi. And it's interesting that she's like, I believe she's described to be 29 or 30 years old, but she already commands so much respect because of her
Yeah.
experience, because of her Jedi powers. Is the Light of the Jedi, and you mentioned that there's a lot of characters in it, is it dominated by women, and is it jarring or like anything out of place for you personally?
I didn't think so. I mean, Avar, she's a big part, especially of the, like, I would say the first third, the great disaster.
Mhm.
But I felt like other characters came to the forefront after that, like alien characters. There's a young man named Bel Zedifer.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I didn't feel like one character was dominating the narrative at the expense of others. Almost felt like there were so many characters we were given to focus on that
Mhm.
I was at some points I was like, wait, slow down. Who's this one now? Like,
Yeah.
I think that's the problem when you are starting something of that magnitude with entirely new characters. Like it's one thing if you're starting something and it's like set during the prequels, like the Clone Wars, where we already know
Yeah.
Obi-Wan and Anakin, but then you introduce Ahsoka and the different clones. But when it's something like the High Republic where everyone is new and I'm like, slow down, I need to process this.
Yeah. And Meg, before I ask you my last question, thank you so much for coming over. I love hearing you talk about Star Wars. I love your reviews that I don't necessarily agree with always.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of it, that you learn from other people, you learn a different perspective on things, and I think it only makes you grow as a fan of Star Wars.
Yeah.
So my last question to you is, I don't think anybody who watches your channel, your audience, and by the way, hi, Meg's audience, I hope you really grow and become more and more popular on YouTube because you have such an interesting voice when it comes to Star Wars fandom. Nobody can question your knowledge of Legends. When you talk about those, and I mean it sincerely, like the way that you talk about these books, you analyze structure, you analyze characters, you analyze what doesn't work, and you explain the reason behind you feel certain things. Star Wars fans have a tendency to and because we live in the social media age where it's very easy to drop your two lines and then discard everything else the other person is saying, you're very deliberate. You make it a focus to explain why you feel a certain way. So I want to ask a person who understands Legends books so much, so well. Can you speak to the quality of prose and storytelling and structure of the High Republic? Is it as good as some of the best Legends, or it's not up to the par?
So I found with most of Legends that obviously everyone who writes is a professional author. It's not like they pulled someone off a street corner or like write a Star Wars book. So they're all, well constructed. I might disagree with like how they chose to structure it and how characters are presented, but there's usually not like craft issues. And I have to say the same thing about the High Republic. Like, I don't read these books and go like, wow, these are badly written. Like, they're well written. I may disagree with characters, and like going back to Light of the Jedi, I love the first third, and then I felt like the last 2/3 got much more bigger in scope, so it wasn't like tight. Like I don't know. I like books when books are like tightly constructed. You're like, wow, that was so well done. But I still think they're worth checking out if you're interested in that era of Star Wars. The Old Republic. Yeah, check them out. They're well written, and they may resonate with you, they may not, but that's the power of books, that like different books connect with different people.
Yeah, thanks. I love that you make that distinction, that what you like or dislike does not necessarily indicate the quality of the book.
No.
The Clockwork Orange was a super important film for me to watch, but I did not very much enjoy it. I would not see it again. But it was informative and important, and I think it has its cultural value for a reason. It's an important film to have. I think it's beautifully crafted. It's just not for me. So for the next time, if you would like to be my guest, I would very much like so, because once again, the way you speak about Star Wars in general is A, very refreshing. It's something that we need more of. And B, you freaking know your stuff. I will never get into a contest with you about your knowledge of Star Wars. For the next time, once again, if things align, I would love to talk about the women of prequels and the Legends books specifically.
Yeah, I'd love that a lot. I only wish my sister were here because she's the big prequels fan. She was so excited about the Padme books by was it E.K. Johnson? But yeah, no, I would love to talk about that. That'd be fun.
Meg, please remind us where my audience can go and find your channel and check you out. And I'll provide all the relevant links in this video so people know where to find you.
Yeah, sure. I'm on YouTube. My channel name is Meg Reviews. My next reviews are, I'm still in the New Jedi Order. I just recently have coming up reviews of Dark Journey and then a short story set during that novel. I'm also on Instagram, where it's mostly just me posting pictures of me trying to recreate Star Wars covers or random Star Wars paraphernalia that I have around. And I also have a Goodreads, but that's mostly just the like text version of my video reviews.
And guys, I think what you will also find very, very cool is not only that Meg's reviews are very on point, but she puts out the coolest, most awesome cosplay costumes, and you do it in costume. I looked in one video, I'm like, hold on a second, I need to listen to this review. you come prepared, and I love that. Once again, guys, you have been watching to the Star Wars Timeline podcast. We talk about things where two fans come in and don't necessarily always agree with each other, but we engage in a productive conversation where everybody's voice is important. Once again, if you enjoy this podcast, please feel free to subscribe, like this video, hit the bell button, and both Meg and I would really appreciate your support, and I will drive as much traffic your way as possible, because I strongly believe that people need to see your content.
Well, thanks so much for having me on. This was a lot of fun.
Take care, guys. Bye.